Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 20 here in the Happy Space Prison. Can't believe we're at 20 episodes already. We have finished getting some preparation done here in the area that we want to do our petroleum boiler. I've gotten all the air vacuumed out, or the carbon dioxide vacuumed out. I did change up some of the layout. I just moved the liquid lock a little bit so I could close off this wall. I wanted to do that so I could have the piping for the water running through the wall, and it just kind of looked a little nicer. I'm still might change a few things up, but then I also did the same on this side to balance out the liquid locks so they look the same. On this side, I can actually take off this edge of blocks now because I just shifted it over one to make it line up. I just wanted it to be the same as the oil well down at the bottom. I have set up a little bit of automation here to clean up the floor because there's a lot of it, and I don't really want the dupes having to come down and sweep it for the next, 50 cycles or so. So the auto sweepers will keep working, loading everything up, shipping it off. I also, in our base, because that comes in right through here, and that's kind of hot, I changed up our piping to put in a couple radiant sections. That way the coolant can cool down a little more effectively because of the hot coming through here. Keep our thimble reed working so we don't back up our bathroom. So everything's good up there. We can work down here for a while. I also did some more to keep stockpiling oil. I have this oil well and this oil well are on. This one I shut off because I don't need more oil, but this oil well, the oil output is cooling down our sweepers down here. We have some conduction panels. The oil is coming through periodically, cooling them down just enough that they don't overheat so that they can keep doing their work. Since they're working in a vacuum, if I don't have some kind of cooling, they'll just overheat and then they'll stop working. Similarly over here, actually I'm having trouble with this one already. It's already damaging. I was trying to use the oil output to cool down the gas pump from this, but it's just a little too much heat. So I'm going to have to figure out a better solution for that. But the goal was to have this so that we could pump the carbon dioxide over to here. We're getting some overheating in here as well because there's just not enough gas in here. I pumped it out too much. So I set automation to only pump out when this goes over 2 kilograms. So as this carbon dioxide works its way out and fills the room back up, it should be okay. This is temporary anyway. We're going to be moving this shortly. So it's all right if the sweepers aren't working. They can get repaired, and we'll just... I'm actually going to set them as disable auto repair for now, because they're just going to keep wasting steel repairing them, even though it's a small amount. We'll fix it in a little bit. We're not going to do it right now. I have a couple extra rows here of reservoirs, so we're pumping up some of this oil. I still want to get this section emptied out. Once that's emptied out, I'll just leave it as it is. But the oil is coming in quickly, and we want to use it. Today is the petroleum boiler. So before we get into doing the petroleum boiler itself, I want to go through and look at a couple of things. So with the oil refinery, if we were to... Let me just put one down so I can look at it. Need somewhere where I have space to actually sit one down. Up here is fine. The oil refinery is something where we pump in crude oil and we use power, and then we get petroleum, natural gas, and heat back out of it. If we were to just use the oil refineries this way, we would take 10 kilograms of crude oil, which is what we're producing. We'd get 5 kilograms per second of petroleum back out of it, some natural gas, and then some heat. And we'd also get oh no, that's it. Petroleum, natural gas, and output, and crude oil in. The problem is that we're taking 10 kilograms of crude oil and we are turning it into 5 kilograms of petroleum. That's not ideal. So if we look at crude oil, if we take crude oil and we get it up above 399.9, technically we have to go to 402.9 because you need an extra 3 degrees variance to force the change. But you heat it up it'll turn into 1,000 grams of petroleum, which means if we use heat to do this process, we don't lose any of the oil in the change. We get the same amount of petroleum back. And then if we look at petroleum, when we go to our power and we use a petroleum generator, we are using petroleum. We get back carbon dioxide. We get back 750 grams per second of polluted water. And we also get heat and power out of it. But so we're using 2 kilograms per second of combustible liquid, and we're getting 750 grams per second of polluted water back. Now, if we remember for our oil, when we are doing our oil, we're basically multiplying the water by 3.3. So when we have our power system using 2 kilograms, but giving us back 750, we multiply that by 3.3, we're over 2 kilograms. Which means if we can do a petroleum boiler to produce petroleum, we can actually use our petroleum generators in a process that creates water instead of a process that consumes water, making our oil wells fully sustainable because we don't need to supply them with water outside of the system. We take water, goes into the oil well, gives us crude oil. Crude oil is sent over here where it is boiled into petroleum. Petroleum is sent over here where it is burned for power. We get water back, we clean that water, and we send it back into our oil wells and start the process over. We actually end up netting water out of the system. So we can turn our carbon district into a water producer instead of a water consumer. So that's the goal. As far as the petroleum boilers go, there are several different parts that you need to do a petroleum boiler. And there's lots of designs and there's lots of ways to make them very efficient, to make them use as, maximize the amount of production you get with the heat that you have. You can do them off of volcanoes. You can do them. I've even seen designs where you can do them using metal refineries to generate the heat that you need. We're going to be doing one that uses a heat spike from magma and pulls up heat and uses that heat to heat our crude oil and create petroleum. We have a lot of magma down here, so it'll last us a long time, and we'll be able to get lots and lots of petroleum out of it. We're also going to do a counterflow system so that when basically as the crude oil is brought in, it is heated up by the petroleum that is going out, and so we end up with petroleum that is cooler than when we boil it, because we're boiling it at 409 degrees into petroleum, and then if we are trying to use it at that temperature, it's going to be very difficult to do. So the parts that you need for a petroleum boiler are a heat spike to bring in heat wherever that comes from, whether it comes from a volcano or another source or from the magma in the mat. You need a heat injector, which takes the heat and injects it into the crude oil in a controllable way. We need a counterflow exchange so that we can counterflow the heat from the crude oil into the petroleum, and then we just need the pumps to move everything around. It's a system that seems very, very daunting, but if you understand the basic concepts, you can build it without having to do a lot of math and calculations, and that's what we're going to do today. So step number 1 in our petroleum boiler here is getting our heat spike going. So we have heat down here in the magma biome that is very, very excessive, and we want to draw it out so that we can use it up in this area. This is why we created a vacuum. If we go in here and we open this up and there was gas in here, then the heat from all of these hot tiles and the magma itself would transfer into that gas, and it would spread out, and anything in there would get very overheated. If we were to do that right here where this oil is, for example, and we just dug down 3 tiles and we hit this 1300 degree abyssalite, the oil would quickly heat up to 1300 degrees, which would mean it would turn first into petroleum, then into sour gas. That would spread all over the place, and it would cause lots of problems for us, which we don't want. So we're going to do it over here where we've made a vacuum. I want to be able to get down in and do work in this area without risking too much damage to our duplicants. And I want to be able to have a space to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a ladder down. I'm going to make it out of obsidian because we have it. I'm going to go up this high, and I think I'm going to go one more layer up. And then we're going to go and put a ladder down in just a couple of tiles, and then we'll get to the hot area here first. For the actual heat spike, we're going to use window tiles that are made out of diamond, and we have plenty of diamond from harvesting our oil biome on this map, so that won't be a problem for us. And then we're going to do a couple of tiles of that. We want to keep an eye on our heat, so for now I'm just going to go down to where the heat is here and then draw some out. Eventually we're going to crack all the way down in until we get to the point where we're in the magma, and we'll start drawing heat out of that. But we want to kind of do this in a controlled fashion so we don't end up causing too many problems for ourselves. I am going to continue this heat spike made out of diamond window tiles up. Let me think about how high I want to go with this. I'm going to go up 10 blocks from this line here, because this is where I'm going to be putting the bottom of our boiler. I'm going to leave this section here empty with just a vacuum in it so that we can continue to clean everything up and we don't have to worry about it. So we want to go from here. That's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so I think I want to take this ladder up with the obsidian. Let's go up to here for now. So what's going to happen is when we connect this diamond tile, it's going to connect to the heat down here, and it's going to start pulling some of that heat out. Eventually, we'll continue down with diamond window tile until we get into the magma. And that means when it's in contact with the obsidian here and then the magma, it's going to pull heat, and the heat is going to pull up like a spike and just bring the heat up to the top where we want to use it. That's the first step of how we're going to use this heat to turn crude oil into petroleum. So I'm going to let them build this out, and then I will show you the next step, which is heat injection. A quick note, and something I often forget about, is that we're going to be dealing with some really hot materials down here. Abyssalite, obsidian, and some igneous rock from the magma converting to igneous rock. So what I've done is I built another storage up here that is just for those three materials. So when we sweep them, they get dropped off here. And I have a bunch of dispensers, that way we can sweep it up here pretty quickly if we need to. And up at our main base, I've taken that out of our automatic dispensers. That way we aren't dumping hot abyssalite and igneous rock and obsidian into our base. So I just put it here for now. It's real close to where we're working. That way we can sweep this up and not have items in the wrong way. I want to show you the heat for this window tile. So abyssalite is a material that has a thermal conductivity of 0. It's technically not 0. It's a very, very small number. And you can tell that by the fact that there is in fact heat transferring into this window tile. When I put it down, it was 45 degrees. It has climbed up so that even at the top, it's 75 degrees. So we're able to get heat transfer from the abyssalite into the window tile. Window tile has a very reasonably high thermal conductivity, so it's able to transfer heat a little better. So that helps. But this just shows you that abyssalite, even though it is not very conductive, will still heat up the window tile. So we're going to continue this process down, and we're going to get to the point where we hit something that is thermally conductive, which is this obsidian down here. And we're going to make some more ladders out of obsidian to get down there. The next thing we're going to build is a layer of insulated tiles to keep this heat where we want it. I've also disconnected all these ladders because I didn't want this transferring heat into the ladders and moving its way around that way. So first things first, let's do the insulated tiles. So we're just going to make these out of igneous rock. We don't need it to be anything super heated for this section, or super insulated for this section, I should say. And we're going to come across like this. And this is going to be like our main floor of our petroleum boiler. I'm going to actually leave a gap here at the end so I have space to get down in to do my work. And then we're also going to bring this up all the way up to right here. That way we'll be able to get in here and build things, but we'll be able to insulate most of this window tile so that that heat isn't transferring to anything that we're going to be going into. I'm also going to disconnect these ladders on the side. They can hop across because these ladders will be picking up some heat as well, and I don't want to transfer heat anywhere I don't want it to. I am a little more cautious than I need to be with some of this stuff, but I definitely do not want the high heat from this system getting anywhere that I don't want it to be. The next part we're going to do is we're going to be building our heat injector. So we're going to be using steel to make a door right here. And then the next thing next to that is a temp shift plate made out of diamond right next to it. And so what this means is the heat that's coming up into this window tile, you can see we hit into this hot area. You can tell because the window tile is rapidly heating up. It's going to climb up to the top here, and it's going to transfer into this door, and then the temp shift plate will allow the heat that is in this door to transfer into other places nearby. This is a system I've kind of tweaked over the years, but it's all based on many, many videos I've watched with petroleum boilers or other posts. So I don't really, I do like to credit when I see things, but I don't have any specific build I'm following. So there's lots and lots of resources for this online. So the next thing I'm going to build is a steel door that goes in this direction. And I'm going to get rid of these ladders that are now in my way. This door is going to allow it so that this temp shift plate from this door picking up heat from the windows tiles, the temp shift plate will transfer to here, but there's a vacuum in place here. And specifically, that vacuum is there to make it so that we do not have any transfer of heat if the doors are not open, or I mean the doors are closed. So the way I want to do that is I'm going to do a little bit of automation on this door. And the first step of that automation is that I'm going to do a NOT gate. And I'm just looking at my notes because I want to make sure I put everything in the right places. This is all going to be made out of steel because this is in a very hot area. And I don't want to have any heat problems. So we're going to connect this to here. And then we're going to come over to here and this way. So what this is going to do is it's going to make it so that when I have this switch turned on, this door will be closed, meaning the on switch for the automation means that everything is turned on, and I can use this switch to force a green light into the door, making it so that we can force the system to be off. So even no matter what any of our other automation does, I have a way to turn it so that this door is closed by turning this switch to the off position. So as soon as we finish getting this NOT gate in, you'll see that this door will open. And that means that this heat from here, will, while still transferring to the temp shift plate, is not going to transfer into this airlock anymore. That you can see this is rising, but this temperature has stayed the same. And that's because the door is open, and that means there's a vacuum inside of it. On top of the door, we're going to do a couple of metal tiles. I'm going to just make them out of steel because I have plenty of steel. And steel will do just fine in here. And it's going to be on top of that we do our next step of automation. And that's going to be with thermosensors. So I'm actually going to do 2 of them like this. And then I'm going to do an automation wire that comes down and connects all. Oh, I did that with the wrong material. I gotta be careful in here to make sure everything is made out of steel because this is the hot center of our system. So this automation wire that's made out of gold, I need to switch it to steel. Let's check it. We're gonna have to do that with all of these wires. So we want steel wires. Autosave, you always come in at the worst possible. Gold wires, all replaced with steel. So we'll get that put in. The next thing we're going to do is start surrounding this chamber. I'm going to use airflow tiles. And I like to do that because airflow guarantees that I'm going to have a vacuum outside of this area where we're going to be doing the different things that we're doing. So we're going to go like this and like this. I think I need one there too. So this chamber is where we're actually going to be putting crude oil, and this heat is going to go in and heat up the crude oil to the point that we want it to be. That means these things we're going to want to set a green signal if we go above, let's say 400 degrees to start. And then we can turn this off. Actually, no, we can't yet because there's nothing in there for us to transfer the heat with. So we're going to have, oh, you know, I'm going to have to be able to get in there to get that piece of gold. I don't know if they're going to be able to reach it from the top. So I think I'm going to take off this side one block just to get that going. I also want to get rid of these ladders that are all in my way. The last part of this automation is we're going to be using a liquid element sensor. We're going to, again, make them out of steel. They're going to go here, and then we're going to do an automation wire that goes down like this, and we'll be going down even farther. I want to go 2 blocks below that door, and we're going to bring it over to go into this obsidian tile here. We're going to bring it all the way down to the bottom and across, because this is where our automation is going to be continuing. I also want to sweep out all the things that are in here when we're done, because I don't want to leave any debris that can pick up heat and cause us to have different things. These sensors here are going to be checking for crude oil. So when we get this thing, oh, I need a ladder here for him to get out. Sorry, buddy. Trapped inside the death chamber. These liquid sensors are going to sense when we're putting in crude oil. If these are detecting crude oil, that means that for whatever reason, our heat is no longer working and the crude oil we're adding has backed up, and that's going to turn our system off, so we're not pumping more crude oil in. And so that's why this wire comes down here and goes over here, because this is where our pump for crude oil is going to be located. So I'm going to get this finished up, and then we'll move on to the next step. But this is our basic heat injector assembly done for now. Our next step in the process here is building this chamber here, which is the chamber that's going to be used to take petroleum out of the system when we have created it. So I just built it up because the automation's a little complicated, so I just wanted to show it to you. I have 2 different hydro sensors in here. Everything, again, is made out of steel. We're going to have some hot temperatures in here, so we're going to be using some steel to make this all work. The pump here is going to feed petroleum out, so we have an insulated line going down here and coming out. We'll work on sending it off to where we need it to go in a little while, but for now, that's where it's going to go. The automation, this hydro sensor connects to our system here, which is the same one that detects whether there's crude oil. So this one up here is detecting if crude oil backs up. That means our system is not heating properly. So we do not want our system to be sending in more oil. This one is detecting if the petroleum has built up to the point where it is up to this point. That means that we are, for whatever reason, we're not using the petroleum, which means that it's going to start flooding the system. So we also stop the flow of crude oil in, and then that feeds down here to this line, which is where we're going to be building that system. This one simply detects if our system doesn't have enough petroleum in here for the pump to be pumping out a full line of petroleum. Don't pump it out. I don't like to have little tiny blips of petroleum going out if the system were to get empty. So if this gets above 250, we can pump it out. We'll keep a little pool of petroleum in here. If it gets up here and it goes above a certain level, it's going to trigger the system that tells us to stop pumping in crude oil. That way we're not flooding the whole system with hot liquids when we need to diagnose what the problem is. Sometimes that could be if the heat source runs out, or if we something else goes wrong, and it could be anything. So that's this chamber pretty well finished. So what we can do here is close this section here, and I'm going to just check my notes, make sure I have this right. Yeah, that's right. So then this can go across like that, and this will be the place where the petroleum is flowing out into the chamber. Above that, we're going to have our next line, but we want to get our plumbing put in before we close anything else off. The chamber down here next to this is going to be for our oil. And so the first thing we want to put in for that is we're going to need another pump. And this, we're going to have an oil reservoir here that we fill up with oil just to have it fit in the space, and we can see that we have a good amount of oil in here to pump directly into the system. In some other designs I've done, I used it as a preheater to shorten my counterflow exchange later, but all it's going to be is a tank that we fill up with crude oil and we're pumped directly out of it. So then we have some more automation to set up here, and we need to get this closed off and start pumping crude oil into it so that this is where we're going to start the crude oil running through. The next part of this, and I'm going to skip over this, we'll do this off camera because the automation is a little complicated. I'll show you when it's done. We're going to go across with our mesh or our airflow tile, and we're going to go the whole way across, and we're going to start working out our plumbing from this pump directly up. So what we want to do is take an insulated pipe at first, and then we're going to come up to here, and then everything from here is going to be gold radiant pipes. So when we start with the plumbing, we're going to be doing a system that everybody refers to as a counterflow heat exchanger. What it's doing is it's allowing the crude oil inside the pipe to be heated up by the petroleum that's flowing out of the system, preheating the crude oil so that it can very efficiently be turned into petroleum. So all that, in practicality, all that means is that we have a pipe that goes back and forth going up, and the petroleum can flow down around it. Let me make sure I have this as far as I want it to go. So it's going to go to there. And then I'm just looking at everything just to make sure I have it all right. I don't want to place this stuff down and then find out I did it too far or anything like that. Okay, so this is how far we're going. So we're going to weave back and forth. And then I'm going to do one last one, and that's our run up to our system here at the end, where we're going to be going into the section up here. So at the very end, I want to switch to some insulated pipe, and I'm going to use ceramic for this because at this point, the petroleum is going to be very hot. I just want to be overly cautious with it. We're going to be going up and over like this, and then I'm going to drop it into 2 steel vents. So this is going to be, crude oil is going to get picked up here. It's going to pump up through this pipe. It's going to go all the way up, back and forth, and then it's going to come up to here and get dropped in. And I'm building all the pipes in first because we're going to be filling in the spaces between them with airflow tiles. And once we've built it, it'll be a real hassle to get back in and change anything. So again, that's why I'm being very cautious to make sure that I have everything built just right before I go on to the next step. We still have a little more construction to do, but I am now filling up our heat chamber here with some crude oil because we want to start preheating our crude oil. Once we get this thing running, we're going to want to have this already converted to petroleum, and we want to do it kind of in a slow, controlled process because it can be a little bit unstable at first because we're getting it changed. Once we have it up to temperature, when the oil comes in, it'll pretty much instantaneously turn into petroleum, and we won't have so many issues. But for now, we want to be able to get this chamber full of crude oil, up about halfway full, so that we can slowly start putting some heat in and get that oil converted over to petroleum. So I think I'm actually just going to do one line up. So I'm going to get a little bit more in there, and then I'm going to start, actually, let's turn it off now, because it's got all this pipe to empty out when I shut this pump off. So that'll fill it up to about 1 level full, and then we can slowly start putting some heat in while we finish the rest of our construction. So all we're doing now that we have the pipe in place is we're slowly going through and filling it in. I use steel tile for this. You don't need to. I just wanted to. Right now, steel is kind of the only renewable refined metal I have. After we're finished with this, we definitely need to tap into our volcanoes and start getting some more metals coming in because we're using pretty much everything we have to get this thing going. But that's okay. It's worth the cost of doing business. So I'm going to finish getting the rest of this constructed and sealed up, and then we will get started on showing you how to fire this thing up for the first time. We're ready to start injecting heat. I actually did a little bit to get started, but first I wanted to show you why we don't want to just turn this on and let it go. So I'm going to take a look at the crude oil here. We're going to pause the system. So crude oil turns to petroleum at 399.9. So the change of state actually happens 3 degrees higher at 402.9, because there's always a 3 degree variance before it actually forces the state change. That way we don't have things just going back and forth willy-nilly. So at 399.9 or 402.9, we get petroleum. Petroleum then converts to sour gas at 538.9, so 541.9. That's not much higher than where we were. It's like 140 degrees. So the way that this system regulates the heat injector is based on the temperature of the crude oil. So if I just turn this on and start injecting heat, this metal tile very quickly goes way above the 500 degree mark. But the oil takes a while to take on that temperature. So if we just leave that on, it's going to take all this temperature, this 1200, 1300 degrees, and inject it into this tile. So what will happen is we'll get to the point where the crude oil turns to petroleum, and it'll just keep going because there's still too much heat in here. So we need to go a little bit at a time. So now we're at 280. It's equalizing out with the metal tile below it. So then we turn it back on, and that means we can inject some more heat in here, and we can turn it back off again. So once we get over that 600 degree mark, we open the door. That way we can slowly inject the heat into the crude oil. When the crude oil gets close to the 400 mark, we can just turn it on and let it go, because this will send a green signal, which is a red signal. But once these are working and sending a green signal without it, then we don't need this anymore. It doesn't matter. So what we need to do is just keep slowly injecting that heat. So I'm going to turn this back on. I usually just leave the door closed for a second or two, and you can see we get up to about 600 degrees. The oil picks up more heat. And I'm not putting any more oil in at the moment because I just want to convert this small patch of oil into petroleum. So it's a tedious process to fire it up at the beginning. I think there's some automation I could probably do to make it so that it works a little better, but I don't think it's necessary because it doesn't happen often. You see we're getting close to that state change because now we're starting to get the animation for boiling. So we're at 340. We'll inject heat one more time. So we're at 600 degrees here, and we have hit the petroleum mark. But hopefully we have just enough heat to keep it going, and we don't convert anything into sour gas. And that was our goal. So we did. We did all right. So now we have crude oil here. We'll turn this back on one more second. Turn it right back off. I just want to get all of this converted to petroleum. It's getting very close to being there. You can see also, before we go too much farther, we have a little bit of crude oil that made it to the end here. We want to clean that up because we don't want to have crude oil running down here. It'll just cause issues. Eventually it'll heat up to the point where it will work, but it will be difficult. So let's inject a little bit more heat real quick. I think we did okay there. We didn't go too far, so we didn't get to the point where we actually made any sour gas, which is exactly what we wanted. So I'm going to get this stuff cleaned up. That crude oil actually pushed its way to the end. So let's get that mopped up. We'll get this stuff cleaned up. We can seal up the lid, and we can turn this on for good. Once we get this on to the point where we have petroleum in here, the petroleum will get up to the 400 degree mark, and it will trip these sensors here so that we don't have to worry about constantly turning it on and off. It'll self-regulate the temperature. And that means that we'll be able to continue to run oil in here and start the counterflow process. So we've reached the point where we have just the final stage to do. So we have petroleum all in here now. So we got all the crude oil turned to petroleum. And so this switch now won't close the door because the temperature in here is above 400. But as soon as we put crude oil in here, the temperature drops, and now it says I'm too cold, and it injects some more heat into the system. That heats it back up, and we get some more petroleum. Once the temperature goes above 400 degrees, it closes off again. Ideally. We may need to do a little more babying just to get it right there. I don't want this temperature going so hot that it causes problems. So we're putting more oil in, and we're going to slowly force it so that we get to the point where we have petroleum all the way to the top. And what it's going to take to do that is a little bit of extra effort. And that's because we don't have the counterflow going at all yet. So we're pumping out petroleum or crude oil that's 96 degrees, and when it's coming out of here, it's still at about 99 degrees. A little bit of heat transfer from this section, but the problem is that means it takes a lot more effort to go to petroleum. Once we have the petroleum flowing down, heating the crude oil back up, it's only going to take a moment for it to go up. So what we're going to do is, as we're slowly filling in that crude oil, we're still going to just take the door and we're going to open it or close it just for a few seconds to get some extra heat in there to convert that crude oil that we put in over to petroleum. And the idea is we want to keep it so the crude oil is down here at the bottom because we don't want it to go over the top. So as we're doing it, we're slowly getting it there. We don't want the temperature in there to drop to the point where it's too cold, but we also don't want to have it go so hot that we have a chance to go to sour gas. So we're going to close that again. We're at 600 degrees there. The crude oil is heating back up and it's turning into petroleum. And we're slowly filling this tank with petroleum. The crude oil will actually settle at the bottom. So it helps us in that regard. And we just keep going until we do that. Once we get done with getting this tank completely filled, so the petroleum goes all the way to the top and starts spilling over, it'll start spilling down through these pathways. And that's going to cause it so that this petroleum will be coming down and heating up the crude oil as it comes up, which means the crude oil will be almost ready to turn to petroleum right as it's dropped in. And we won't have this significant drop in temperature that we get for when the crude oil is put in. So that's our goal, is to get it so that we get into that cycle and we keep it going. The next thing we need to do after we finish that is just setting up the line and putting in petroleum generators that will start using the petroleum to make power. And petroleum is a unique power source in the sense that petroleum is a renewable fuel source because the water we get out of the petroleum is more than the water it takes to make the crude oil. So we pretty much just want to burn petroleum when we have petroleum, whether we need the power or not. And then the rest of them we use if we run low on power. So that's what makes it so unique. Let's turn this on one more time, get some heat in there. Pretty much I just like to wait until the doors are starting to open and then I close it again. That gets us to about 600 degrees and that can get us to where we need to be. Let's go again, another cycle. But we would rather do less temperature than more because we don't want to risk putting this up so hot that it causes any problems in this tank. So we're just going to continue to slowly inject a little bit of heat until we get it to the point where we are flowing petroleum out. Reach the point where the system is working. We've gotten our preheated petroleum up here. I've now set our thermosensors at 403, which is where we want them at, which will make the system work. The problem is because I didn't have a system for burning petroleum, the system backed up, which is good. It demonstrates that this actually does shut off the crude oil flow. You can see it shuts it off and then it's still filled up pretty decent amount because oil was still pumping up there. And because we get a lot of petroleum out of that. Everything is drained out. There is actually petroleum. If you look on the liquid screen, you can see petroleum is in all these lines. And so when oil comes up here, it's almost at the point where it's turning into petroleum inside the pipe, but it's not quite there. Just a few notes on the counterflow heat exchange. I didn't do any calculations on this. You can. There's definitely a lot of resources to figure that out, figure out exactly how long a pipe you need. But the basics of it is that the shorter the counterflow, the hotter your petroleum is going to be, because there's less counterflow happening. If you, and right now the petroleum is heating up because the system is off. But this system, this amount, means that when it's not running and the petroleum is just sitting here heating up a little bit as it flows back down, we're still well underneath where we need to be for our steel pumps to work. And so I'm fine with that. When it's running, the petroleum comes out at pretty much almost the same temperature the oil comes in at, because we have a pretty good exchange going. So that's how I figured out how big to build it. I just mostly filled the space I had, made it as long as I could so I could get a nice exchange from it. If you want it to be hotter, you can make it shorter. If you want it to be cooler, you can make it a little bit longer, but there is a limit to that. But that's how you can build this without actually doing all the calculations you need for it. You know, once you know how the heat injector, how the tank up here works, how the counterflow heat exchange works, and how this pumping automation works, petroleum boilers become a lot less of a mystery to figure out. You just have to put those pieces together in a way that works. And like I said, there's lots of different ways to inject heat. You don't have to use magma. You can use a volcano, the magma from that. You can use, there's lots of different ways. You just have to have something that will consistently give you enough heat to bring the petroleum up to the 400, or the crude oil up to the 403 degree mark so that it turns into petroleum. And then once you can sustain the heat, then this will work. Lots of ways to do it. So this is now pumping petroleum out. It's going over to our petroleum generators. So far I have 3 of them built. I'm running really low on steel, so I'm waiting for more steel to be built. I'm going to build 6 of them. We'll never run more than 5, but 6 fits in here nicely and neatly, so I'm going to do that. I'm not hooking these up to automation. I'm just going to run them when we have petroleum, because, like I said, that's going to produce a lot of water. We'll start harvesting this water to clean, to make more oil. But for now, I'm not even producing oil. I am for this one, because I still have these loaders under here running, and this is actually heating up because I don't have anything there. So I'm probably going to have to take this one out. We got most of this swept up, but that oil is what's cooling these systems down underneath here. So actually I took off the induction panel on this one, and I shouldn't. Let's just fix that. I do want it to keep running. I'd like to get all this stuff cleaned up. So I'm going to do that, and then, so I have a little bit of oil being produced, but mostly I am burning through the excess oil we have here, because we already have this huge stockpile. And if I can get this burned down, I also can reclaim a lot of the steel that I built all these reservoirs out of. So that'll help us as well. And then once we get to the point where we have the crude oil reservoir, the crude oil stockpile gone, then we can turn this on and we'll have renewable crude oil. We'll have renewable petroleum, which will create renewable water to make more oil. And the system will sustain us for the rest of the playthrough. It's going to give us enough petroleum to run 5 petroleum generators, which is 10,000 watts of power, which is, 10 kilowatts is nothing to be, nothing to laugh at. If you put it into perspective, all of this power that we used at the beginning of the playthrough, all the way through the first 1,000 cycles, was 10 kilowatts. So we have effectively created a system that doubles our power supply, which is pretty excellent. And it's renewable. It's a cycle that will continue to renew itself pretty much forever, as long as nothing breaks. Just have to finish closing this off up here, and then get these last couple petroleum generators in, and we can let this go for a long time, and it will handle everything we need for this system. So let's put in pipe here. Nope, down like this, and then all we have to do is put in those last 2 petroleum generators when we have enough steel. So the next thing we're going to work on is probably moving our power grid around now that we have a sustainable amount of power, but we have a lot of things we need to do. And frankly, cleaning up the map is high on that priority. I have a lot of stuff to do where there's just water collecting down here from ice melting and things. But it might be easier to wait and do that after we move our base so we can add in more duplicants. A lot of different things to weigh on what we're going to do next. But for now, we're going to just let our petroleum system just work and do its job and give us plenty of power so that we can start automating things even more. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. I know this was a longer one, but I wanted to fit everything with the petroleum boiler and generators into one episode. Tried to keep it as short as I could. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.